Okay, can you guys see my screen? If you can see my screen, please just react or confirm that you can see my screen. Ah, okay. Thank you so much, Daniel. Okay, so we are going to start. My name is Takura. Uh just finished school like 2 months ago, and I'm a very passionate debater. Been debating in the African circuit for a while. Uh yeah, and I'm here to give you a workshop. I think um what I'm just going to base my workshop in, I didn't want it to be very meta heavy. I wanted to tackle a very specific scenario. Um, that moment in time when you get into a debate and all of a sudden you are not aware of the content of the motion, you're not aware of current affairs or whatever the motion is giving you. So you're basically confused and you still have to argue. So the workshop today is about how to win if you have no arguments, how to win if you basically have no context. And I think that's what I'm going to be doing, just going to be doing today. If you have any questions, I would definitely appreciate if this was interactive. If you have any questions, just post them in the chat. You can please feel free to unmute yourself as well, so that we can have the discussion around it. Because most of the things that I'm going to be teaching you are going to be um, very applicable if you have case scenarios that you have in your mind. So what you're going to do is I'm just going to give you the general structure of how I view debates. Then afterwards, I'm going to give you a motion which probably most of you have no idea about, like context-wise. Then we're going to try to use the frameworks that I've given you to tackle that motion. Then from there onwards, we just do a Q&A and we'll be done with the session. Um, okay, so for me, it's simple. I think when you are in a debate room, you have to think of debate as a game, for example. So you you are trying to play the game where you are convincing people about your arguments. And I think that's the first keyword that you have to understand, that BP specifically. Uh, did someone say something? Or is it that I'm not audible? I believe I'm audible. I'm just going to check again. Am I audible? Just react to the thumbs up. Okay. Right. So BP specifically is about convincing people. Like the game that you're playing when you're doing a British parliamentary is just the persuasion game. And it's important to note this because it's not about like at its core, it's not about how accurate you are, it's not about how much meta you have. It's about, are you able to sound convincing? Are you able to convince someone to believe what you're saying? So if you know that the game is to convince people, then you would easily filter out your arguments based on their ability to convince people or not, not based on whether their arguments are recent, current, or the arguments v- you have so much meta or so much statistics. If you know that the game that you're playing is convincing, then you're good to go. But that doesn't help that much, because the next question that you need to ask yourself is, okay, so who are you then convincing in this particular game? You're convincing a judge, but this judge that we are all convincing, we are all trying to convince, is a judge that we can attribute characteristics towards. And after we see that this judge believes in these certain characteristics, it will be easier for us to know how to convince them, or would have a cheat code on this game of convincing. So most BP debates, it just happens just based on my experience and the trends that you've been going about. You see that most of the judges that we have are utility-based judges. Um, so that means for some reason or the other, there is an inherent bias on outcomes to say which systems help the most people, which systems work in practice, which systems have they seen, which system is most likely going to create the greater good in society. Knowing that the person you're trying to convince is utility based and there's a bias inherently on outcomes gives you a leg over on picking which arguments to choose because regardless of whatever position you're speaking of, whether you're speaking first, whether you're speaking second, and you're speaking last, the idea that you know that this game is going to be based on who has the greater outcome, who has the most positive outcome, or who has the greater utility in the debate, allows you to have a greater edge in the sport. So I think that's the first characteristics that we need to know about the judges. Just a conversation about utility so that it's clear, but I'd presume that majority of you at this point in time would know what the utility-based game is. Um, this is to say that given an array of arguments, which we are going to try when we do the exercise, when it comes to prioritizing which arguments you ought to push or which arguments ought to be your stance or the major point of your case, it should be entirely on what is the outcome after you finish this. Even if you're arguing principle-based arguments, the idea of if we implement your principle, what is then going to be the outcome of that principle? How many people are going to be saved? How many people are going to live happier lives based on the principle that has been implemented? In the event that principles are very abstract and they do not possess clear outcomes, then you would argue in the absence of the principle, because sometimes when you argue principle arguments, the absence of the principle in itself has very clear detrimental outcomes that you are trying to avoid. The easiest example to think of would be choice, because usually when you argue choice, it's difficult to show that after someone receives excess choice or receives the plethora of options to choose from, they are going to live a better life by just having more options because you're not proving that they are going to choose the better option. You're just proving that they have more options. But why is the argument of choice then a better argument if you think about it in a utility framework? Because the absence of choice means then you are constrained within one specific path, means that you are basically being forced to do something. And when you start talking about being forced to do something, then we now have equating power to things that we have seen in life where people have been forced to do something and it has never been good. So these are the cases of like think of slavery, think of abuse, think of any other thing that exists in life that like even murder in itself is not allowing someone to exercise their choice to live and things like that. So you see that it might be difficult to argue for the outcomes of the principle that you're trying to prove, but because the absence of the principle has inherent outcomes that's there, I think that's one case you can frame your argument. And you can start thinking like that just based on the fact that you know that your judge is a utility-based judge. And since your judge is a utility-based judge, you're trying to argue more outcomes so that you can see what the world looks better. I have seen a lot of people reframe this to maybe impacts or pragmatics, but the whole idea of it is, are we able to understand that our judge is a utility-based judge? And from there onwards, are we able to argue in an outcome-oriented way? It's not that to say that if you argue in any other way that is not outcome related, you are not going to win. We're just saying where do you have the higher chances of convincing a judge? So these are like the idea is, as you're trying to tell you at the end of the day, that the idea is you have no context of whatever the motion is. You have no idea of how to argue the debate, and you just have this cheat sheet that the game is convincing, and the person I'm convincing has this first characteristic. They lean more to outcomes. So even if I do not know what I'm about to say, if I argue more of outcomes, I'm most likely going to convince this person because that's just the mechanics of the game to begin with. The second characteristics that you have on the judges, specifically BP judges, is that majority of them um, are progressive, um, which is, what can I say, left-leaning judges, or they um, they care more about things that are inclusion based, equality based, inclusion based, equality. Um, you find out that the world we live in generally has a balance of people who support conservative values, then people who support progressive values. But in the debate space, particularly in the BP debate space, most of the judges that we have um, left-leaning, and they support progressive policies. So now that you know the second characteristic of, okay, the judges that we have right now, going to support things that are based on progression, equality, inclusion. And you know that the second thing is that they are very outcome based because they like more utility arguments. Now you can start combining these two characteristics of your judges to try to convince them on what arguments you're going to play, because now you're looking for arguments that have more outcomes for minority groups, arguments that have more outcomes for oppressed groups, arguments that have more outcomes for groups that have been eh, not included in like history and all these other things. To the extent that you should try to find this line of argumentation, you're most likely going to be more convincing. This particularly works in the scenario where you have no idea what the motion is, you are very confused about what's going on, and you're still an ethical debater. You're not going to cheat, and you're just going to argue based on metaphors from other cases, and that's how pick you would pick this. Then the third thing that you would see about the type of judge that you're trying to convince is that they are very consistent um, when it comes to morals. So the idea of your judge being very consistent when it comes to morals is just to help you to be able to take hard lines. The BP judge that we have believes um, a certain principle that, let's say, all minority groups should be included in whatever the case. If the cost of this inclusion is, I'm sorry for the noise in the background. I have planes passing over my head, but if the cost of this inclusion is very high and it's something that is either close to impossible or something that is very it hurts so much to achieve this inclusion, you might feel like, oh, then it might not be worth it, because based on your rationale, based on any rationale of a person, this might be too high of a price to pay. But the third characteristics of a BP judge is that you're going to see that this judge necessarily doesn't care about the cost of their morality. They are going to be very consistent in whatever the case is. So as long as if you prove that we are upholding this outcome, we are going to make sure that it's a progressive outcome, even if the cost is very high. You are then put in a position where you are able to take a very hard line, lines that are impossible to defend just because you know that your judge is going to be consistent when it comes to certain moral standings. So we've done two things so far already. We've told you that we are playing a game. The game is the game of convincing a judge about any random thing. That's the game that you are playing. The game is called convincing. It's a persuasion game. But because now you know who you are convincing, and you know that there are three characteristics of the person you are convincing. Number one, they're utility based. Number two, they're very progressive. And number three, they're very consistent on their morals. You now know which arguments to pick, um, to make sure that you're able to convince them. I think the next thing that I'm going to do is now to show you how to do it, because I have shown you what the game is, I've shown you how what the game is, then who you are trying to play the game against, then how to play the game, which is simple now. And this we're just going to do in the context of you have no idea what the motion is, because it helps so much if you have an idea of what the motion is, but we're going to talk in scenarios where you have no idea, because that will be my masterclass, how to win debates without arguments or meta. In the meantime, I'll just ask if there are any questions, if everyone is understanding me right now. um the question I got, who did I get this from? Okay, I can't see the name, but the question is the claim that eh, is the claim that most judges are utility based true, especially in the South where you be DCA? Okay, so um we are not thinking about it in the sense of which principles to run. Like I had mentioned before, if you are going to run a principle, it would be like it would be more convincing if your principle is based on outcome. I think the most hyped principle argument I've heard is the Bosseo speech on redress. And I think when everyone is starting their BP journey, they start it based on that. So when you start to break down that argument on redress, you tend to see that it's not just it's true based in its principle that redress is supposed to be achieved, therefore we should do all of our means to achieve redress. It's true, like the reason why it convinces most people, or why you would find the speech impressive, is because redress becomes true after you've seen that with redress you are going to relieve lots of people from the shackles of poverty and everything else. So it's still, yes, a principal argument, but the fact that makes it more convincing is the idea that it's based on a utility framework. I hope that answers the question. If there are more questions, please just put them in the chat, then we'll go. So how do you play the game now? So the first thing that I would like to tell you about is our context arguments. So context arguments is about framing. So you're going to get into a debate, and in fact, let's just do the exercise right now because I am seeing that we're running out of time. So uh let's use the Rwandan government recently, because I'm in Rwanda, recently announced that every store that exists needs to introduce EBMs, which are electronic billing machines. So the idea is that these EBMs are going to be used to monitor everyone's transaction and the government has an easy way to collect revenue. The government has mandated that every store should use the ABM so that the government is involved in every transaction. We get a motion. This house opposes the use of ABMs. The reason why I'm picking such a topic is based on the number of people that are going to watch this masterclass and the people that are here. I'm quite sure that no one has ideas of what an EBM is. So it's one of those situations where you are getting to see the motion or to hear the context about the motion for the first time when the motion is released. So I hope that this is a good topic to show that um, debates like this do exist and you would still have to argue. So, context arguments. How do you win solely based on what your context is, aka framing? So, what you want to do is that um, change what the debate is about, because you as a debater, especially if you are a first speaker, but regardless, let's just assume you are preparing as a team and we're given a motion and you want to change to win specifically on context. So what we know about ABM so far directly from the motion is that ABMs were introduced by the government. Um, we know that this is happening in Rwanda. We know that this is being forced on everyone or on every transaction. And this will be a way of government collecting tax and right. That's all we know from what we have been given in the info slide. So we're going to assume we're gap. We'll do the same exercise, assuming that we are up. So context arguments changes the conversation from EBMs because a debate as direct and as simple as this would most likely argue about the advantages and disadvantages of EBMs completely on the flat line, and that's where people would hurry or dump their meta based on just what context they have. What we'd like to do now is to change the flow and change what the debate is about, specifically by framing and arguing the context around it. So there's a trick that this one, sorry from the masterclass from Hamza, is about supercomposing and decomposing. Supercomposing and decomposing frames. To say if you're given something, you either expand it uh, by going levels above it, or you shrink it by going levels below it. This is to say, what we have right now is a system that everyone is supposed to use for every transaction. And we want to, everyone else is going to be arguing about ABMs because we are assuming that you're the only one who's disadvantaged right now and you are the only one who doesn't know what's going on. But you now know that this is a system that everyone is supposed to use. So your chart now is EBMs included. You are against any system that forces everyone to use it. So any system that particularly doesn't have an opt-out. So we've basically supercomposed this to think of any system that people don't necessarily participate in. This becomes a debate about social credit systems, behavioral systems, like all these systems that have been developed by governments just to monitor people, to control people's behavior, and all of the likes. The fact that we're able to take that and go with it to that level and just argue on the principle of it to say that for opt out. For opt-in to exist, we need opt out. We need people to have the ability to use choice. We need people to feel that they can detach themselves from the government. Whatever arguments that you can feel of on government oversight and like government authority, all those arguments are now into play because you just saw one thing in the frame that you were given where everyone is being forced to do this, and you now took this idea to say that this is a forcible system and you're against all forcible systems. You get how from there onwards we didn't have any arguments, but we are able to make a case entirely for about a motion we didn't know, for about emotion we didn't know without any context, and frame the debate to such a good frame that everyone else will be arguing around us. So now you just start doing all the other argumentation structures that you've been taught about in the previous masterclasses, the masterclasses that are coming about how to argue basic arguments and everything. But my point is, we found a way to source an argument and to frame it around something so that the debate changes and the debate follows your tone instead of you trying to catch up to what everyone else was saying. Besides that, then I think the idea of context arguments is probably something that's very clear. I'm not sure. Let me just check if there's anyone else with questions. Okay. The next thing that I'm going to talk about then is just putting another idea here on the idea of text, like just so that we have a second example of what context arguments look like. So the fact that this is a technology and is doing text arguments, the idea of real-time access and whether people are secure enough, whether we trust the security of the government, like the idea is, based on the four ways that we have gotten here, we're able to pick whatever context that's necessary to frame the debate around it and to make sure that the debate is about that instead of the debate being about the main thing that has been framed about. So if we go, this also opposes the use of EBMs. Most people would argue the benefits and the disadvantage. We now have the option to argue whether we trust the government. We have the option to argue what has been happening in Rwanda or whatever information that you have about Rwanda, whether be it the genocide and how it affects this, whether be it how it's booming in the digital sector, argue about everyone. That's the example we did about forcing people into a system. Then we can argue about text and everything else. This is just one way of doing it. Just to frame through about everything I was discussing. The first thing is that we are playing a game, the game where we are convincing people. I have described the judge and what kind of judge that we are trying to convince. And since we are done convincing this judge, how exactly do we convince the judge? The first idea I gave is context arguments. Now, the second thing that you can try to do is arguing from comparison, which is basically weighing. So when you're now weighing your arguments, there are three frames that I would say you could use to weigh, but there are a lot of other videos that explain weighing better. So we could do impact, we could do time, and we could do scale. This is to say that you're going to get symmetrical arguments in majority of debates, and that's fine. So if you're a closing team, we have no idea what you're going to argue, and you enter into a room, your prep sheet is empty, the debate starts. Opening Gav argues, opening up argues, and you now have an idea of these are the arguments that are in play. So based on what you know now, you can now start presenting the same arguments, but your analysis is different in one of these three metrics, and you just win based on weighing. So impact in the idea of how many people are going to be deeply impacted by the same argument as compared to what was provided in the opening half. This could be your own bench or the other bench by just comparing symmetry. The idea around this is that one, you are able to make concessions which people don't usually want to make, but it's a way for you to win arguments by basically agreeing so that you don't waste time disagreeing with obvious facts. So you hear something that you think makes sense, you hear something that is very convincing, and you yourself are convinced. Instead of being arrogant about it throughout the entire debate, you can just accept and concede in the debate that, okay, the argument that you have been given here is quite valid and it makes sense and we accept it. The reason why the argument then becomes better off from your side is now based on any of these three things: impact, at which how many people are deeply affected. Then you show that on your side, same argument, the impact is just quite greater on your side. The second thing you can show is speed, to show that either yours happens faster or yours are more permanent compared to slower things and temporary things. Then the next thing is to just talk about scale, how many people are being affected, and just the volume of everything that you are going to do. I'm also assuming that this assumes that the argument structure is on point and you're just not going to list everything as bullet points. So you can using them in combination to say, after you set a frame and you go like, oh, this debate is about people being forced to use things, and we want to show you that that's particularly a bad thing. And now that frame in itself on the surface level might look like it's not a winning frame. So then how do you make sure that that frame wins? When you now go to all the other arguments that have been already been placed in the debate, and you show it that based on that argument alone, aside of your frame, you win on your impact. So it makes your frame look very unique because it's the only asymmetrical argument that's there. But assuming that there are other arguments that are still there and you are not able to share the impact with them, or you're not able to weigh against them, what is the other way that you can make your arguments win entirely? And that's when you go to winning by elimination, and we'll call it washing. So the idea of washing arguments is to say that arguments are going to come, and it's a debate, it's a game, you are trying to convince people. So other people are also trying to convince people, and you need to see which argument convinces them the best. Remember the judge that you are convincing. So what you are doing now when you are washing is very simple. You are trying to show the judge that you are convincing that certain arguments are not worth being convinced by. If you eliminate all these arguments by washing them down, then you're able to promote all the other arguments that you have given in positive matter. The reason why I put washing as the last way of presenting your argument is because you at least need one of these two in combination of washing, because you cannot just go and eliminate arguments entirely. You still need to present a solid case that is able to make your team unique. So how then do we wash efficiently? So number one, we can do this by assigning importance on the arguments that are presented. So this is assuming that you cannot go head on against the argument. The argument that has been presented here is that the idea of efficiency. This is a technology, so it's very efficient, and on your side, because human beings will be the ones to do the text thing, then they are not very efficient. So the argument of efficiency is one that you are thinking to yourself, okay, this is an argument that we are supposed to tackle, but you cannot tackle it head on. So the important metric that you are now putting is, we bring up a new argument, then we say the argument that you are going to bring up is the argument of trust. And you want to prove that in the importance metrics, trust weighs up against efficiency. So the reason why we would wash that argument is to prove that efficiency in itself, for it to function, it needs to be a sub-block of trust. So every efficient system functions because the people who are participating in the system trust the system and believe that the system is not cheating them, or the system is not corrupting them. To the extent at which the government now comes, forces people into this, a government that we know to be highly corrupt, they can easily systemize their corruption into it. The second that people stop trusting this process, the second people stop believing into the system, they entirely opt out of everything and the system crashes. Now it doesn't matter how efficient the system is because people don't trust it anymore. So in that way, we have not denied the fact that efficiency is a good argument, or efficiency is an argument that's supposed to be regarded, but we have just shown that for efficiency to work, it needs trust. So we have washed that down, we have washed the argument down and presented our case based on our new argument and our new frame. Okay. Wow. So, okay, I guess I'll end this now, then we just go into questions because I see I planned an hour for this and it's about 10 minutes left. So just to wrap it up and just explain the concept I was explaining. So, the idea here is that you've gotten into a room, you have no idea what the motion is, and you're supposed to argue and win the debate. So what are you going to do? The first thing that you ought to see debate is to see that BP debate specifically is a game of convincing, is a game of persuasion. Since you now know that you are playing a game of persuasion, who are you persuading? You're persuading a judge you know who's consistent in their morals, a judge who's progressive, and a judge who's utility based, more leaning on outcomes. So how do you play that game? Told you that you can start by pointing out the little things that you have identified in the motion or in the information that you've been given, and you win by just context arguing, by framing the debate to particularly meet what you did. And you can do that by supercomposing or decomposing an argument. You can watch a video by Hamza on that to see how exactly you supercompose and decompose those arguments. The next thing is you can win the debate by doing comparison weighing, by weighing based on impact, weigh based on time, and based on scale. Then the last thing is you can win just by washing arguments, by showing that you're eliminating things based on importance. There are still other ways of elimination. I think I'll ask the people organizing this to be able to provide links of other weighing mechanisms, other washing mechanisms, and the video on supercomposing and decomposing. Generally, that's how we play the game. And if you're given any motion, you're able to do this. I would have loved if we're able to do an exercise where people give us motions. Then we would be able to practice the things that you have learned. I'm going to just go into the sections. Okay. Uh, okay, there are actually quite a number of questions. So should you avoid running principles as valuable in them? So my chat is specifically on this debate masterclass is on I am going like the one thing I wanted to achieve was to teach you how to argue if you have no idea what the motion is. If you get to a debate and the motion is entirely a principle heavy motion, and you know that this is a principle heavy motion, and you are quite aware of what's needed by the motion, do what you have been training all along. My chat is now you have gotten into a debate and you have no idea what the debate is about. You're surprised by the motion, you basically don't know where to start. Then in that regard, remember how the game is structured and how you play the game. And in those regards, try to run your principle just based on outcome, and that just increases your chances in themselves. I hope when I gave the radius argument, it sort of showed, but I could try give another example after I finish the questions to show you how exactly you do the principles based on outcomes. The next thing is, isn't this only possible if you are a ring lord? If you debate a lot outside of your turf, you cannot predict judges. Okay, so the research that I did to come up with this masterclass and to come up with this is what judges are doing is just based on my own debate experience because I've been debating outside of my areas quite a lot. I started debating in Southern Africa, went to debate in East Africa, partnered the West African, then started debating there, and everyone there debates in different style and they value different things. But the general consensus I have is that this is what's going to work for the majority of people. It might not be the one who is working for most people, but in my experience in my debate career is the reason why we've been winning majority of debates just by understanding that the game here we are playing is convincing and the person you're convincing is these characteristics. So in a panel of five, you're most likely going to meet three or four people with that mentality, and that's what you're capitalizing on. This is the Hail Mary of debate. That's what you're just practicing to say the last part so that when emotion comes and you don't know it, you're not going to be like, oh, I am out. I'm definitely a fault. We are removing auto faults basically by giving you a fighting chance. Um, you need specific knowledge in order to have enough context to change the debate. So like what we explained here on our context arguing that, for example, when I gave you this motion of this house opposes the use of ABMs, no one here knew what ABMs were. Um, and the only thing that we got from the info slide was that this is the government imposing this on everyone, and it's happening in Rwanda, and it's a tax-related things. Uh, that in itself is something that you got in the motion, but because you know that everyone is being forced into this, the first good way of extending the frames was how we supercompose, and you went to the level above it, and you're like, forget specific knowledge on EBMs. We hate all systems that force people to do things because they remove opt out, and opt out is particularly important. Then you start arguing about things that you know. You're not using specific knowledge on the topic, but you're using knowledge that you already have on your prep meta about general things in life. So you change the conversation from EBMs to systems that force people, and that's a whole entirely different debate. And the way you validate that debate is then when you do the washing and the comparisons. Um, Please, is washing just rebutting? Because if you really need to wash an argument, you need to counter it with your argument. So the washing technique that we use today is washing by showing importance. Understand that when we're arguing, what arguments did we use? Um, when you're washing, we used efficiency to show that efficiency is not as important as trust. We didn't refuse at any point that efficiency does not exist or efficiency is bad or efficiency is a terrible thing. We just showed you that in the importance metrics for efficiency to work, people need to trust. So we invalidated the argument, not that we removed it or we rebutted it. We just made sure that it wasn't relevant to the debate that we're having because it's not as important. That's just washing. I will make sure, I will hope that Ocom allows me to send you all these links so that you're able to see how you can wash better and you can do everything better. There are often emotions that are contextual to places or events that have occurred at specific places, e.g., I recently saw a motion on Venezuela saying this House supports the US placing a bounty on the president of Venezuela. How do you then deal with this, especially when you know almost nothing about Venezuela and teams in the debate are going context heavy? Exactly, exactly. The whole masterclass was based on this type of motions. I think we'll just do this motion right now, so that you're able to see what you're talking about. This is especially on Gov when you can't simply paint the US as a bad actor and why you don't want the US interference. Okay, so the Venezuela motion. Thank you so much, Daniel, for it. Let me just copy it so that we have it and we can do everything that you have learned. Um, this all supports the US placing a bounty on the president of Venezuela. Then we're going to do Gov and we're going to do up. So the words that we got from this is that we have the US, we have a bounty, we have the president. Those are the words that we know. We have no idea where Venezuela is located or what's happening there or why this person deserves to be killed. So we're going to be arguing, let's say, based on context. So you can pick anything from the US to say, since we're dealing with the US placing a bounty on the states, then we could decompose or supercompose. This is to say we look for other actors or go inside of the actors to see what else. If we're going to supercompose and look for other actors, then we would say if it's not the US who's going to do this, then who else is most likely going to do this? Then you see countries like Russia pop up, you see countries like Britain pop up and all these other things. Now, what you want to show, the debate changes to being a bounty on the president of Venezuela to just show who is the best person to put a bounty on the president of Venezuela. In this Gov, you're supporting the US. So the stance from US Gov is to say other countries ought to do this as well if the US doesn't do this. What we are going to show you is that the US is the best actor to do this. Now you can argue military might, economic might, all these arguments that you already know about the US. As op, let's pick the second word, the bounty. You want to oppose this whole idea, and you're like, it's not that we have anything, we support the president of Venezuela or we support the US doing this. What we are just against in principle is the idea that we are against just putting bounties on people. You argue value of human life and all these other things without knowing what the president of Venezuela did or whether they deserved to die or not. This is just to show you how you can change based on context arguing, because that's the way you can win, especially if you are the one who's speaking first. I think the comparison and the weighing and the washing were very intuitive and were easy to hear. Yes, are there any more questions? Right. There are no more questions. I don't know. Does anyone want to say anything, ask anything? Or was it clear? Was there any part that was not clear? Um, Ah, okay. I hope it was clear. I hope it helps. Because this is something that happens, especially when you travel for a tournament. You get there and they're arguing things that are happening in their country, and you have no idea of what's happening in that country, and you want to stand a chance to win. So, the best way you can do this is by that, knowing how to convince people, knowing the type of judge you're going to convince, and the ways that you're going to convince them, framing, weighing, and washing. Um, okay, quality stuff then. If there are no more questions, you guys enjoy your night. Thank you so much for joining. Truly, truly appreciate. Okay, I think I'm just going to end the call.